vehicles. Jacques Littlefield's team have set themselves a huge challenge. A burnt-out, rusted Panther tank is going to be restored with military precision.
We try and keep the same welding process that was used originally. If they used arc welding originally, we put the pieces back together with arc welding. And we use the same type of rods, the same process, and we try and make everything look the same. Try and replicate the width of the welds and the shape of the bead and make it look exactly the same.
In preparation for surgery, the tank is stripped down and examined from top to bottom.
We take the major pieces off, usually the turret, the tracks, the engine, and we evaluate what can be reused, what has to be completely replaced, and then, of course, what we're missing.
When we're cleaning out the vehicle, on this vehicle, we found the slide for a World War II German handgun. We found unused machine gun rounds that would have been used for the bow gun or the coax gun that's in the turret. We found a flare gun cartridge.
Long after this Panther's final action, Dave found himself under fire.
We had vacuumed out the interior of the vehicle fairly extensively, and I was using a large rosebud torch to heat a suspension component up in the front corner. And I put the torch down in this area where there was still a machine gun round. And the thing went off, and my ears were ringing, and I thought I'd been shot. I checked for puncture wounds, and it was pretty scary because I didn't know it was there, but obviously I found it with the torch.
Yeah, I hear this bang, and it was really loud, and I yelled over, "Are you all right, Dave?" And he didn't say anything at first, and then, "Yeah, I'm okay,"
Everybody in the shop heard it, rushed to the scene. "Are you okay?"
The Panther was known for its in-your-face design features. The Panther's front armor was angled, and this gave it a deadly edge in combat.
The chief advantage of sloped armor is the fact that if you take, say, like on the front of the Panther, the glacis they call it, the upper piece of plate, is a little bit thicker than 3 inches. And when you take a 3-inch plate and lay it down, that plate essentially becomes thicker. There's a longer distance that a projectile would have to travel through it. And you also have a deflection factor, where a projectile that may hit that angled plate may just deflect right over the vehicle.
The Panther's sloped armor was copied directly from the enemy, from the Russian T-34.
Prior to the invasion of Russia in June of 1941, German tank design tended to be, as many other countries did, basically with vertical sides, basically a block design. And once the Germans saw the Russian tank, they realized instantly that this was a superior design, and I think it was a real shock to them.
This Panther isn't giving the restoration crew any breaks. After one world war and decades immersed in a river, the turret is too far gone to be saved. But the damage yields tantalizing clues about the Panther's final moments.
When the tank arrived, of course, the turret was separate. And it was obviously fractured and blown apart by an explosion. That was the first apparent thing that we found.
The entire top plate, armor plate, was warped real heavily, we think, from the explosion. And then we had a piece of armor on the left side that is about 5/8 thick that was completely shattered.
So the Panther took a savage hit, strong enough to shatter heavy armor plate and push back the tank's firewall with the engine attached. Where did that explosion come from? Another tank? A mine? A rocket at close range? As the crew rebuilds their Panther, it's possible all the answers they're seeking could remain submerged forever beneath the surface of the Blackneedle River. Brian and Alan Rudder work at the Kevin Wheatcroft Collection, one of the biggest in the world. In a tank workshop, sometimes just unscrewing a rusted nut and bolt can turn into a major headache.
You should be able to rotate this to get to the anchor bolts at the back that hold the whole assembly, the backing plate on, and you can't get to them because it's corroded solid.
Panther tank's been in the workshop now for something like 4 years, although we've worked on it for about 2.5. It took a year just to take it apart. This thing had stood for 50 years in a French scrapyard. It's one of those things I've wanted as a child. I saw the pictures in the comics and in the war films, and I wanted one.
No, it's still got the size of it.
Once we get all that undone and the inner drum off, I want to pull it out that way, out of the hull, hang it on there. It's quite a heavy thing. The end plug's gone, which is a shame, but the other plugs are still in, so there's a good chance of it being reasonable condition.
Heating up the metal can help loosen parts that have been locked in place for decades. If that fails, there's always the last resort. Cut the piece off.
We don't like cutting stuff, it's the last resort. You persevere for so long and then in the end it's just not feasible. You have to give up. Admit defeat.
I'll get the forklift and move it straight out. So you're not hand rolling it out.
Like that. That there is attached to the mechanism here. There's a circuit that goes on there. You're supposed to take the circuit off through one of those windows, and when you pull this whole assembly off, that's supposed to slide off of here. But that's just corroded solid. I was warming it, prying it, but so in the end, last resort.
It's been a lot of heartache, but great fun. It's a mixture of sort of archaeology, mechanics, and just the joy of seeing something come back to life again.
In combat, the Panther was feared for many reasons. Ferociously accurate, the Panther's gun is considered by many to be the best of the Second World War. This gun fired 75mm rounds and could take out enemy tanks at 3,000 yards. If an American Sherman ever came face to face with the Panther, it was no contest.
At the shop here, we have a lot of tours come through, and we have tankers that were in World War II that come up and tell some of the horror stories about being in a Sherman tank, getting shot at. Some of them come up and just look at the Panther now and they just tremble looking at that gun because they're still scared of it.
The Panther's barrel was more than twice as long as the Sherman's, and this gave it a much higher muzzle velocity.
That was the primary advantage the gun had. It had a velocity in excess of 3,000 feet per second, depending on the kind of ammunition using. At the time, the Sherman tank was on the order of 2,000 feet per second. The velocity, which will determine both your accuracy and how much armor you can go through, how much energy you can deliver to the target.
The Sherman tank had a similar sized gun, but a lower velocity weapon. And the Sherman didn't have the ability to penetrate any part of the Panther, but the Panther gun had the ability to penetrate basically any section of the Sherman because of the higher velocity of the main gun.
Yeah, see.
It was a one shot, one kill kind of an affair, you know, a Panther versus a Sherman.
One of the toughest challenges for the crew is the Panther's turret. It's one of the most complex pieces on the most complex tank of its day.
This turret is so badly shattered and it has had so many shoddy repair attempts that we